Okay, I think we're live. Look at that. Sorry, got a little frog in my throat. I didn't know because I haven't been talking this morning. All right, we are going to talk about changing machine of choice or whatever you're doing. If you're going for a walk or oh, something else, this always makes me stretch. Okay, we're going in 15 minutes. There we go. I did figure out that I get a better workout if I slow it down. There we go. Actually, feel it. Okay. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Today. And like I mentioned earlier, today we are going to talk about changing your story and what that takes. So, let's just define what your story is um, because I have had people tell me, I can't, that's ridiculous. You can't change your story. The story is just what is true. It's what happened in your life. Well, there is truth to that. And we're not like making up a story that didn't happen. But what we are doing is helping to change the focus of your story so that you can start to get different results. Because what you believe about your life and your past is what you're coloring your future with. And so I'll give you an example. When um when I married my second husband, like I was terrified. Um I was terrified because I just was like I just don't even know how to. I wasn't 100% sure what had happened in my first marriage, why it had all gone so badly. And I so that was one thing, is that I didn't feel like I had control to not do it again. And so that by itself is a story, right? Of just like I had a story that I wasn't in control of what happened in my life. And I mean, I get it that there are other people in your life and they do affect your life. But what you choose to believe, think, or do about what other people are doing um, is really what you do have control over. And that's the thing about it. People were created to act, not to be acted upon. And I've thought about this a lot of just like, if you are thinking that your situation is different and that you can't change your circumstances, then you are right. Henry Ford said, if you believe you can, whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. Because it really is about what you believe. And I've said this to myself, my kids, um, lots of people that I mentored or coached. It doesn't really matter what I believe. It matters what you believe. And that is true for all of us. It doesn't matter what anyone believes. It matters what you yourself believe. It doesn't matter what anyone outside of you believes. It just matters what you believe. So now don't misunderstand. Other people are important and you can get valuable feedback from other people. But ultimately, if you're going to succeed at whatever you're going to succeed at, it's because you believe that what you're doing matters and is valuable. So I was going to tell you a story. I started to tell you a story. When I first met my first husband and when I first married my second husband. Sorry, let me get this straight. When I married my second husband, I was terrified. And the reason I was terrified is because I was unsure about myself. I did not believe that I was a good wife. I believed I was a good mom. I felt like I had proven that. I was taking really good care of my kids. even while I was single. I took really good care of them before. I was very committed to making sure that they had, what they needed and were on a reasonable schedule, mostly for my own sanity. But I did those things. And also, I had taken some parenting classes. I took a love and logic parenting class. I took 6 weeks of parenting classes back to back, and I had learned some really great skills and also some great words because that's a big part of changing your story. So prior to that, I didn't really have good skills in managing my children. I just, wanted them to do what I said, and that was like the bottom line. And if they didn't, then I would get mad. They were little, and I was, supposed to be training them, but I thought that training them looked different than what it actually ended up looking like when I was successful at it, which was after I took some parenting classes. So yelling at my kids and basically throwing my own adult temper tantrum because they were being children was not effective. And so I learned new words to say. And one of the things, and my kids will attest to how much they hated hearing me say this, is regardless of that, regardless of if and this was later that they would say things like, you're the worst mom in the world, regardless of if I'm the worst mom in the world, we still are going to move forward with whatever it is that I said was going to happen. And my kids did learn because I was very calm and um, I was very like, uh, I don't want to say stubborn, but kind of, right? I was very committed to whatever it was that I said. I wanted them to know that what I said, I was going to follow through with. And I really tried to do that because I felt like if you tell your kids that you're gonna, if you get all your work done, then we'll go blah blah blah, and then you don't for any reason. It doesn't even matter if you have a flood or whatever. If you don't follow through with your word, then your kids, they start to lose trust in you. And so changing your story, even for yourself, is like keeping commitments to yourself, right? And it's keeping commitments to your kids. And if you for some reason can't because of a flood or an emergency or whatever, you have to make that up. Like you have to go in, acknowledge the situation and let them know when you are going to follow through with what it was that you said you were going to do or something equivalent if it was like a one-time thing and you didn't do it. It's really important because you have to build that trust. And just like you have to build trust with your children, you have to build trust with yourself. So even though me and my mom are the only ones who show up to this, and I don't really care because I'm just like practicing. But if you're here and you're hearing this, then thank you. The consistency, me getting up to take care of myself is really what this is all about, to help myself have a news story that I'm the kind of person who gets up and works out, even if it is laying down and letting this machine wiggle my feet. Okay. So back to my marriage story. So I was a good mom and I had learned some really good skills in my parenting class, and I felt pretty in control as you can be as a parent, of, helping to keep a calm home. So enter my husband and his four more children. Now things are very different because there's different parenting styles. There's different ideas about everything, right? And we are parenting. That's what we're doing. That is the project, is to raise these kids and to build a relationship between ourselves in the process of doing this. But, traditionally, or I guess when you get married the first time, and if you only get married once, then it's the only time, then you have some time to kind of work out your stuff before your kids really realize what's happening in your life, right? If you work at it, you can kind of get through the tough stuff in your relationship in the first 4 or 5 years. But if you get married and you have kids that are in their, you know, um, early teens, or whatever, they get to watch you work all of that out. And that's not fun because that's also pressure. And also, they have all their own emotions. And also, everyone has a relationship to build with everyone else in the family. And since there were four of them, there were eight of them altogether, each of us had four. And then the two of us, that's 10 people. And, and all five people in each family have to develop five new relationships. It's a lot. It's a lot to ask anyone. But this is where, your story comes in. So the first 3 years were pretty much chaos. It was it was really rough. I remember grabbing hold of my husband's hand, and this memory in my mind, we are standing in the living room, and it feels like, and I know this isn't really what was happening, but it feels like everything in the room, all the kids, the house, the furniture, like everything is just like swirling around our heads, right? Just like, and we're standing in the middle, in the eye of the storm, so to speak. And I grab hold of his hand and I look into his eyes. And I know this part happened. And I said, I think we can do this. And that was 3 years in, right? So it continued to be chaos. And my story did not improve right away, other than I had that like flicker of hope that maybe we could do this while we were standing in the eye of the storm. The whole world was swirling around us. But the story that I had about my husband um changed a little bit later. It still took another couple of years. So during those first like probably solidly 7 or 8 years of marriage, I had a terrible, just like desire. It wasn't really a desire because I didn't really want to do it, but I just had this feeling of like, I wanted to run, right? I just wanted to get out. I wanted to not be in the marriage. I wanted to dump all my responsibilities, not my kids, but I wanted to just like be done with the whole thing because it was just so hard. It was very chaotic and it was really hard. And I felt so insecure of myself as a wife. Felt good about being a mom, but I did not feel like I was a good wife at all. And I had lots of reasons to believe that and lots of stories that had been fed to me in my first marriage and also that I had eaten. I had totally ingested that belief that was given to me by someone else that I was not a good wife. And so I felt so insecure and it was really a really hard story to overcome. So once I learned how to rewrite the story, then things really did change and they changed really, really quickly. So if you need to change your story, I'm going to tell you how basically. This is what you do. This is what I did. Hopefully it will work for you too, but I've seen it work for people. So what you do is there's a couple of ways to do it. The way that I did it is I actually rewrote my whole life. I met a friend. I met a woman. Her name's Becky Rogers, and she has a life story transformation. If you go Google it, you might find something. She doesn't have a good, or she hasn't had a good website in the past, but maybe she does now. Anyway, life story transformation. So I met her and I talked to her. She told me I could buy her coaching course. And so I did. And she walked me through all of the steps. And I'm going to tell you what the steps are because it's so simple. You can't even believe it. But if you want to go a great coach, then you can hire her to do it if she's still coaching. I don't know how she's doing it now. Anyway, so I wrote the story and I wrote a story in every area of my life. So I wrote a story about money and I wrote a story about my family relations, including my marriage. And wrote a story about the home that we lived in. And I wrote the story about how it felt just basically any area of my life, our recreation, our, just our livelihood, like everything. And it took me a long time, not like a long, long time, but it was a couple of weeks process to kind of refine the story. And then once I got the story written, then I actually read the story out loud into a recording and I put music behind it, just like classical music, so that I could listen to the story. And then I started listening to my story. Well, every night I would listen to my story before I went to bed. And at the time, my husband was more of a night owl and I was more of the morning dove. So, I was going to bed and he wasn't going to bed at the same time. And so there was like a space in between that. So anyway, so I would listen to my story. I actually was listening to it before I went to bed. Oh man, look at that. I'm out of time. But what happened was as I listened to my story, it would make me mad. And I was mad because what I had written in my story was not the life that I was living. So then my brain was telling me, you are lying about your life. You are basically gaslighting yourself. And so I just had these like a lot of um discord, right? What is it called? Cognitive dissonance in my mind, which was causing a lot of stress for me. And so I would listen to my story and then I would get mad. So I called my coach and I was like, I don't know what to do because I hate listening to my story because it's lies. All of it is just complete lies. And she started laughing and she said, you have to listen when you're asleep. Don't listen when you're awake. You have to just like turn it on and go to sleep. Well, thankfully, that was the one thing that was really going well in my life was that I could go to sleep like immediately. I was so exhausted. So I put in my headphones when I would go to sleep. Well, headphones hurt my ears, and I didn't like that. So, because of that, I did not want to keep listening with headphones. So I told my husband, you cannot listen to my story. So if you come upstairs and it's time to go to bed and my story is still playing, because, it took like 30 minutes to listen to the whole story. That was a long story that I wrote. And so it took me that much time. And so anyway, and I said, so you just turn around and walk away. Well, I don't know if he did or if he didn't. He says he didn't listen to my story, but I didn't know if he did or didn't because I would go to sleep. Well, this is what happened as a result of that. Within 2 weeks, my kids and my husband started getting along better. Now, they were not listening to my story. My husband was not listening to my story. I was the only one listening to my story, and I was listening to it while I was asleep. So, why do you think that's what happened? I'll tell you why. My focus changed. What I was looking at in my family life changed. Instead of noticing all of the things that my husband was doing wrong with my children, I started noticing the things that I'd written into my story. I started noticing when he did those things the way that I had written it into my story because everyone is not all good or all bad. Everyone is both. And when we put people into pockets of like who we think they are, then we make it so that that's all we can see because that's the story we're telling ourselves. So, do you see how you are building your own life? You're building the story. You are building the story of your life. And whatever it is, whatever the results are that you're getting right now, if you're unhappy, you can change your story. But you are the creator of what is happening in your life and you can change it. So there you go. So my stories are getting a little long-winded, so maybe I'll up the time on my machine and we'll go a little bit longer. Or maybe not. We'll see. Anyway, have a great